Fellow at the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi, and Academic Counselor here at IGNOU. And today we'll be beginning the paper that is Administrative System in BRICS. The code of this paper is BPAE 143. So the name of our paper is Administrative System in BRICS. So in this paper, we are going to discuss the administrative system in the BRICS countries. That is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So I welcome you all to today's this paper entails. So in the first block is pertaining to the constitutional framework and structure of government in the BRICS countries. That is the Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa. So as part of that, today we are going to discuss the first unit, which is the constitutional framework in the BRICS countries. The second unit of this block, it consists of the legislature. The third unit consists of the executive, and the final unit, fourth unit of this block 1, it consists of the judiciary. We have the bureaucracy and control mechanism over administration. That is the name of the second block. And as part of that bureaucracy in the BRICS countries, the role of the bureaucracy in policy making, implementation, and analysis in the BRICS countries. The sixth unit is regarding the control mechanism over administration in the BRICS countries. And the third block is concerned with personnel management. So there are two units in the third block, both related to personnel management. The first one, that is seventh unit, it is concerned with recruitment and promotion. And the eighth unit is concerned with the training of civil servants in the BRICS countries. The fourth block of this paper, if we see, it is pertaining to planning, budgeting, and audit system in the BRICS countries. The ninth unit in this fourth block is relating to planning process in the BRICS countries, and the 10th unit is relating to budgeting, accounting, and auditing system in the BRICS countries. The final block, the fifth block of this paper is relating, which consists of the 11th unit. It is relating to local governance in the BRICS countries. And the final block is concerned with emerging issues. So the final block, that is block 6, it includes the 12th unit, which is relating to citizenship, governance, and administration. The 13th unit relating to growing role of civil society in the BRICS countries. And finally, the 14th unit, which is relating to BRICS administrative reforms in governance. So these are the 14 units that we have discussed so far. Let us begin with the first block and the first unit. So the first block is constitutional framework and structure of government in the BRICS countries, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So the first block, it includes the first unit, that is BRICS constitutional framework. So as we all know that the constitution of a country, it is the written supreme law with few exceptions, by which all other laws and rules in a country, they must comply. So the constitution of a country defines the main rights and responsibilities of the state, and also of the various institutions that make up the state. And in some cases, the constitution of the country, of a certain country, it defines the rights and responsibilities of the citizens as well. So a constitution, it's generally more difficult to adopt, amend, or revoke, because it requires some form of special approval process. Now, this special approval process, it includes a specifically created assembly, and also a referendum or a super majority within a parliament. So it includes the approval of national and subnational parliaments also in a federal state like ours. So of the legislative assemblies also. In case, so if the government of India, if it wants to amend the constitution in such a way that it affects the federal structure of the country, if it wants to amend the federal provisions of the constitution, the provisions relating to center-state relations. So if the government wants to amend those provisions, then that amendment, it has to be passed not only in both houses of the parliament but also in more than half of the legislative assemblies. So that is what is being talked about here. So the constitutions, they often include the definition of the role and responsibilities of an institution. That is, so what are the roles and responsibilities of an institution? So elected or appointed. So a constitution is basically it includes the definition and role of the definition of the roles and responsibilities of an institution, which in our case is the parliament and the state legislatures, which are elected or appointed to pass legislations and also to represent the interests of the citizens. So these institutions, that is the parliament and the legislative assemblies, they can be known by many names, such as the parliament, the National Assembly, the Congress. So in the United States, it's called the Congress, right? In our country, it's called the parliament. In Pakistan, it is called National Assembly. So legislature. So, but all these institutions, they have similar mandates, and a constitution is the basic and legal frame of a country. So, constitution, it is a law or a collection of laws and rules that create the framework for how a country is going to be governed. And this framework, it usually describes the powers of different levels of government and also the process for creating laws. So, in this unit, we'll be discussing the constitutional framework of the BRICS countries and also their basic features of the constitutions of these countries. So let us begin with the constitutional framework of Brazil, which is the first country of BRICS that we are going to discuss today. So, with an area of about 8.5 million square kilometer and a population of approximately 2 million, so more than 20 crore, Brazil is the largest and most populated country in South America, and it is also the largest and most populated Latin American country. So Brazil, it became independent in the year 1822 after more than hundreds of years of rule by the Portuguese. So the Prince of Portugal, who was Pedro I, wrote 7 constitutions, beginning with the Constitution of 1824. So, if we see the Constitution of 1824, it gave the Emperor of Brazil wide-ranging powers. Now, what were those powers? They were control over governing institutions, the legislature and provincial governments, and also this Constitution, it lasted till 1889. So, when Pedro II was overthrown and the Republic of Brazil was formed in 1889. So Brazil got completely rid of the yoke of Portuguese colonial rule, you can say, in 1889. Although it had become independent in 1822, but it remained like somewhat like a dominion till 1889. However, in 1889, the Republic of Brazil was formed and completely separated itself from Portugal. So since 1889, Brazil, it has had several forms of government, if we see, including state autonomy and centralization, authoritarianism and democracy. So let us now discuss the Constitution of Brazil, which was formed in 1891. So the first Republican Constitution of Brazil was very similar to the Constitution of United States. So this first Republican Constitution of 1891, it established the presidential system and also introduced male universal suffrage from the age of 21. And this Constitution of 1891, it also contained several provisions. What were those provisions? They were separation of powers, checks and balances, a bicameral legislature, like we have in our country, direct elections, and also federal chamber as well. Now let us discuss the constitutions of Brazil from 1934 to 1937. So in the year 1930, Getulio Vargas, he organized a military revolt and led a coup d'etat. So there was a coup that took place in Brazil in the year 1930. It was led by the military general Getulio Vargas. So in 1934, this military government, it created a new constitution, and after a couple of years, Vargas, he faced a counter revolution, which forced him to stage a coup after which he began a new constitutional process. And this constitutional process it ultimately resulted in reshaping the features of the constitution, such as authoritarian, giving importance to executive and legislative powers of the president, who was the supreme authority of the state. So, as per this constitution, the president of Brazil had the powers to appoint the governors of the provinces, and these governors then in turn appointed the mayors of the cities. And during this period, all political parties were dissolved, and the Congress was closed, and individual rights and guarantees were also suspended. So it was more of a dictatorship. So this government it had a great intervention in the economy as well. So the Constitution of 1937 it allowed Vargas to proclaim a dictatorship, which came to be known as the new state or Estado Novo. And Vargas went on to remain in power for another decade. So in 1946, another constitution of Brazil came into being. So in 1946, the constitution was being replaced by the new state's dictatorship of Getulio Vargas after he was overthrown by his war minister. So a representative democracy was established and a new president, Eurico Gaspar Dutra, was elected for 5 years. And this time, what we see was that the Constituent Assembly of Brazil it drafted a more balanced and liberal constitution. And this balanced and liberal constitution it re-established the basic individual rights and separation of power. So let us discuss the constitutions of Brazil in 1967, from 1967 to 1969. So there were many drawbacks in the constitution of 1946, and these drawbacks they severely compromised this document's spirit, and also eliminated the constitution of Brazil's democratic character as well. So therefore, this 1946 constitution it was replaced by a new constitution of 1967, and this constitution was again changed through a constitutional reform in 1969. And both these constitutions they were characterized by centralized power in the hand of the executive, in particular the president, because they sought to institutionalize the military regime. So let us now discuss the transition of the constitution in 1988. So in 1970s, the military regime of the previous constitution faced popular uprisings and dissatisfaction as economic progress it became too slow, and it ultimately transit the authoritarian. It changed the authoritarian route to democracy in 1974. So the president, who was Ernesto Geisel, and his chief of the cabinet, General Golbery de Couto e Silva, they conducted a gradual process of political opening or liberalization, and this liberalization it was characterized by small advances that limited the establishment of a full democracy. So thereafter, in the year 1985, the government approved the convocation of the National Constituent Assembly to draft a new constitution. And for the drafting of the constitution of 1988, 559-member assembly adopted a from scratch participatory methodology, and also they organized public hearings as well. So after 20 months of deliberation, the National Assembly of Brazil, they produced the 1988 constitution, which came to be known as the Citizen Constitution. So now let us discuss the structure of the government under this 1988 Citizen Constitution. So under this new constitution of 1988, Brazil it became a presidential federal republic, and an amendment was also done in 1996 in which the municipalities were incorporated within states as part of the federation. So consequently, what happened was that the Brazil it is now composed of 26 states as well as a federal district of Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil. So the federal, state, and municipal governments in Brazil they have their own legislative, executive, and judicial institutions. And the aim of the 1988 Constitution, which came to be known as the Citizen Constitution, it was to give state and municipal governments more administrative autonomy and also responsibility for policy implementation and decentralizing the federal power. So now let us discuss the main features of the Constitution of Brazil. So let us discuss the features of the executive branch. So the executive branch is headed by a president who is directly elected for a 4-year term. So the president of Brazil is both the head of the state and also the head of the government. And although all of Brazil's constitution since 1891 they prohibited consecutive presidential terms, but after the amendment of 1997, this rule has now been changed as the president now has no limit on the number of terms, but the president may not serve more than 2 terms consecutively. So now let us discuss the legislative branch. So the federal legislative branch of Brazil, it is bicameral, and it consists of the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate. So there are 513 federal deputies and 3 members from each state and federal district who are elected to serve 8-year terms. So 1/3 and 2/3 of the members they are alternatively elected every 4 years, and 81 senators are also elected by proportional representation from each state of Brazil, and they serve a 4-year term. So now let us discuss the judicial branch. The federal judiciary is composed of the federal Supreme Court, the Supreme Court, the Superior Court of Justice, the regional federal courts, the labor courts, the electoral court, and the military court. So the Supreme Federal Court is the highest court, and it consists of 11 justices who are appointed by the president, and this appointment is approved by the Senate. So this Supreme Federal Court can declare federal, state, and municipal laws unconstitutional as well, and therefore this Federal Supreme Court can declare such laws as null and void. So now let us discuss the new constitutional developments in Brazil and also the challenges that came up. So in 2013, the Brazilian government faced a widespread national dissatisfaction, and this was expressed in Brazil's largest protests in 20 years on a range of issues. So what were those issues? They were corruption accusations as well as the costs associated with hosting the 2010 FIFA World Cup, and also the general high living costs as well. So the then president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, she sought to overcome this situation by proposing to vote on amending Brazil's constitution by calling for a constitutional assembly to reform the political system. And the Constitution of 1988 it served the country for more than 3 decades with several amendments that were done in 1992, 1993, 94, 95, and 96. So the polarization of the contemporary Brazilian politics, if we see, it only serves to reinforce the critique of presidentialism, which was advanced in 1988. And the Radical Party has favorable political setting to win elections in all scenarios. So therefore, there is a feeling that surfaced for the need of change in the constitution in coming times. So we have discussed the constitutional provisions of Brazil. Now we shall be discussing the constitutional framework of Russia. So, since the disintegration of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, that is USSR or Soviet Union, in 1991, Russia has adopted different economic and legislative reforms to adapt itself into the new model of capitalistic free market economy. So the Russian government it has made efforts in establishing a new statutory framework which substantially differentiates itself from that of the Soviet era. And the Russian government has also tried to bring the country up to modern standards. So, due to shortage of time since its new regime, Russia has developed its legal structure at a fairly quick pace and also in a fairly large scale. So, however, the current Russian legislative system it is still deemed very unstable and not well established. So, let us discuss the constitutional structure of Russia. So, the constitution of the Russian Federation it was adopted by national referendum on 12th of December 1993, And this constitution, it came into effect, it came into force on 25th December 1993. And this constitution of Russia, it gave a detailed structure of the various powers which are headed by different heads, like a federal sovereign power, federal structure and governing system. And later on, these powers, they are being modeled after many Western democratic systems also, embracing the doctrine of separation of powers by composing of three branches, that is executive, legislature and judiciary. So the constitution of Russia, it consists of preamble and two sections. The constitution is also specifically emphasized it this constitution of Russia, it specifically emphasizes on self-determination, human rights and civil liberties of citizens, and these are the key points that are emphasized in the constitution, as no other form of democratic government has ever existed before in Russia's history. So now let us discuss the basic features of the constitution of Russia. So the first feature is the federal structure. So Russian Federation, it is comprised of 83 federal entities, and among these 83 federal entities, 46 are oblasts or provinces or districts, 21 are republics, there are 4 autonomous okrugs or districts, there are 9 krais or territories, there are 2 federal cities and 1 autonomous region or oblast, and these all are subject to change. So the constitution of Russia, it granted these entities some autonomy also over their own internal economic and political affairs. And the constitution of Russia, it also lists out some reserved power to these entities. So the constitution of Russia, it also gave discretionary powers to the regional bodies to pass laws, provided those laws, they do not contradict the constitution and existing federal laws. So now let us discuss the executive branch in Russia and the structure of the executive branch. So the highest executive power in Russia, it is split between the president and the prime minister. And the president here is the dominant power in Russia. He is the dominant figure. The president of Russia, who is Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. So the president of Russia is elected by popular vote for a 4-year term, and which was later amended to a 6-year term by the parliament in 2008. So the term of the president in Russia now is 6 years. So the president of Russia has the right to choose the prime minister also, with the approval of the State Duma. And as the head of the state, the president of Russia, that is Vladimir Putin, makes decisions on domestic and foreign policies, and also holds the position of the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And the president also possesses veto power over legislative bills, and also issues decrees and directives that have the force of law. And also the president of Russia resolves issues of citizenship of the Russian Federation as well, and also awards state decorations and grants pardons also. So now let us discuss the parliament and legislative system in Russia. So the legislature of Russia, it is represented by the Federal Assembly of Russia, which consists of 2 chambers, that is the State Duma, which is the lower house, and the Federation Council, the upper house. So the 2 chambers, they possess different powers and responsibilities. While the State Duma is of more significance, as the State Duma, it carries the main responsibility for passing federal laws. Although bills, they may originate in either legislative chamber, they must be first considered by the State Duma, and they must be adopted by a majority vote before it could be turned over to the Federation Council, which has 14 days to take a vote on it. So if this bill, if it is rejected, the bill will be returned to the State Duma, which then can only pass it with a 2/3 vote again in the same form. So if a bill is adopted by the Federation Council, it must be signed by the president to become law. So the president has a final veto, but the State Duma and Federation Council, they also have overriding power by passing a 2/3 veto vote. So now let us discuss the judicial system. The Russian judicial system, it basically comprised of 3 types of courts: The first is the courts of general jurisdiction, which is subordinated to the Supreme Court. The arbitration court system under the High Court of Arbitration, and also the Constitutional Court. So, the Ministry of Justice in Russia administers the judicial system and the General Prosecutor's Office. So, Internal Affairs and Federal Security Service perform the duties of law enforcement also. Now we have discussed the constitutional framework of two BRICS countries, that is Brazil and Russia. Now let us move on to our own country, that is India. And now let us discuss the constitutional framework of India. So the Republic of India is located in South Asia, as we all know, and our country is bordered by Pakistan, China, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, and Bhutan. And our country is also the seventh largest country in terms of geographical size, as well as having the world's largest democracy. So, demographically, India is the second most populous country after China. So, India is bordered by Pakistan, China, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, Bhutan, and Afghanistan also. So, our country is a very diverse country also, with different cultures and religions mutually coexisting. And there are two official languages, Hindi and English, which are used for federal business. And the constitution recognizes the existence of many other languages. So, being a federal nation, our country has 28 federated entities and 8 union territories. Uh, so, on March 20 till March 2021, we have 28 federated entities, which are states, and 8 union territories. And our country has parliamentary form of government, which is based on the Westminster model. And in 18th century, our country, India, was annexed by the British East India Company, and later on in the mid of the 19th century, India fell under British colonial rule. We all know that. The colonial administration of the British India, or which was known as the British Raj, it ended with the struggle by Indians for independence, and this was marked by a widespread non-violent resistance movement that resulted in independence from British colonial empire in 1947. Now let us discuss the constitutional history of India. So after independence, a constituent assembly was framed. It was formed in 1948. So to draft the Indian constitution. So the constituent assembly came into being in 1946 only, not in 1948. It came into being before independence only. And the constitution, it was prepared by the constituent assembly, and and the task of preparing the constitution, it was completed on 26th November 1949. However, the constitution, it was adopted on 26th January 1950 to commemorate the Purna Swaraj Divas, and this constitution is still in force till date. And this constitution, that is our constitution, the Constitution of India, it basically consists of the fundamental law of India, and was mostly embodied in a series of statutes that were enacted by the British Parliament. And key among these statutes was the Government of India Acts of 1919 and 1935. That is the Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms of 1919 and the Government of India Act of 1935. So now let us discuss the Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms, or the Government of India Act of 1919. So the primary purpose of this act, it was to expand native participation in the government, as well as to establish dual form of government with limited powers. So the Imperial Legislative Council, it was transformed into a bicameral legislature for India. And at last, this act also established the position of a High Commissioner with residence in London to represent India in the United Kingdom. The government, now let us discuss the Government of India Act of 1935. So this Government of India Act of 1935, it was adopted in response to opposition from the Indian National Congress towards the Act of 1919, that is the Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. Because this act, it did very little in terms of granting autonomy to the Indians. Let us discuss some of the key provisions of this act. So the key provisions of this act was abolition of the dual form of government or diarchy, and the granting of a larger degree of autonomy for the provinces, Another key provision, it included establishment of a federation of India, introduction of direct suffrage and extension of franchise. Membership of the provincial assemblies was also altered so as to include more elected Indian representatives who were able to form majorities and be appointed to form government. So, also this Government of India Act 1935, it also established a federal court, which is now known as the Supreme Court. So, let us discuss the Constituent Assembly and also the Constitution of 1950. So, in 1946, the British they decided to examine the possibility of granting independence to India, and as a result, a British cabinet mission was dispatched to India to hold discussion with the representatives of British India and also the Indian princely states in order to agree on the framework for writing a constitution. And this cabinet mission it set up a constituent body and an executive council that was formed on the basis of provincial assembly elections, which were conducted in 1946. So, following this cabinet mission and the ensuing negotiations, a constituent assembly was indirectly elected by the provincial legislatures, comprising of 278 representatives, including 15 women. So, political parties they represented in the Constituent Assembly. So, the Congress Party it had a majority in the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly met for the first time in December 1946, and by November 1949, that is November 26, 1949, which is celebrated today as the Constitution Day, the draft of the constitution was approved, and of course, this was done under the leadership, under the stewardship and guidance of Dr. Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly and played a very important role in the formation of the constitution. So, the Constitution of India came into effect in January 1950, and the Constituent Assembly was transformed into a provisional parliament. So, our constitution, which is still in force, it has been amended over 105 times till August 2021. So, there are 105 amendments that have so far happened to this constitution, and our constitution is the one of the most frequently amended constitutions in the world. If you compare it with the constitution of Japan, which has never been amended since 1945 till today, in the last 79 years, the constitution of Japan has not been amended even once, and our constitution has been amended in the last 74 odd years. It has been amended 105 times. So, our constitution is also known to be one of the longest and most detailed constitutions in the world. And there are 395 articles in the constitution, there are 22 parts, and also there are 12 schedules in the constitution. So, these 22 parts, originally there were 395 articles, 22 parts, and 8 schedules. However, now they have increased to 470 articles and 25 parts and 12 schedules, as well as 5 appendices as well. Let us discuss some of the basic features of our constitution, that is the Constitution of India. So, as we all know, the Indian constitution, so it envisages a federal system with unitary bias, and the Indian constitution it declares that India, that is Bharat, should be a union of states. However, our form of government it also exhibits many federal characteristics also. What are those federal characteristics? They are supremacy of the constitution, division of powers between union and states, and also existence of an independent judiciary. Let us discuss. So, our constitution it is a written and detailed constitution also. So, our constitution is a wholly written document, and our constitution it also incorporates the constitutional law of India. And our constitution was fully debated and also duly enacted by the Constituent Assembly of India. And our constitution it took the Constituent Assembly 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days to write and enact the constitution. So 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. And our constitution is also a self-made and self-enacted constitution. So the Indian constitution is a constitution which is made by the people of India, acting through their duly elected and representative body, which was the Constituent Assembly, which was organized in December 1946. So, the first session of the Constituent Assembly, it was held on 9th December 1946, and the objective resolution was passed on 13th December 1946. And this objective resolution, it became the preamble of the Constitution on 22nd January 1947. Let us now discuss the fundamental rights which are envisaged in the Constitution. So, the provisions of fundamental rights, they are incorporated in Part 3 of the Constitution, and these fundamental rights, they protect the basic rights of freedom, equality, life, and religion. And these fundamental rights, they are considered inviolable by the state, as there are provisions of judicial remedies also to safeguard these under Article 32, that is right to constitutional remedies. Hence these fundamental rights, they are inviolable. So our fundamental rights, they are not sacrosanct and absolute, however. And India, it's a republic, we all know, and the preamble of our republic declares India to be a republic. And India is not ruled by a monarch or a nominated head of state. The president of India, who is the head of the state, is elected and remains in office for 5 years at a time. So India, it has an elected head of state, who is the president, and who wields power for a fixed term of 5 years. We've already discussed that. And after every 5 years, the people of India, they indirectly elect the president of the country. Let us now discuss the fundamental duties which are enshrined in Article 51, Clause A, and they form part of the Part 4A of the Constitution, which was inserted by the 42nd Amendment in 1976 during emergency. So there can be no rights without duties. We all know that. And the original Constitution, it had no provisions for fundamental duties. So it was inserted. The Part 4A was inserted by 42nd Amendment to Constitution to lay down a code of duties for the citizens of the countries. And besides having other features like parliamentary form of government, mix of rigidity and flexibility, independent judiciary, single citizenship, bicameral legislature, and directive principles of the state and policy. All these things are there in the Constitution. There is parliamentary form of government. There is a mix of rigidity and flexibility in the Constitution. There is an independent judiciary. There is single citizenship. There is a bicameral legislature. There are two houses: Rajya Sabha upper house, Lok Sabha lower house. And there are directive principles of state policy which are there in the Part 4 of the Constitution. However, they are not legally justiciable, these directive principles of state policies, unlike the fundamental rights which are justiciable in nature. So we have discussed the constitutional framework of India in brief. So far we have discussed the constitutional framework of three countries, that is Brazil, Russia, and India. Now let us discuss the constitutional framework of China. So as we all know, China, which became the People's Republic of China on 1st October 1949, and now as of March 2021, China, it consists of 23 provinces, 5 autonomous regions, and 4 municipalities. So Hong Kong and Macau, they are the two special administrative regions whose laws differ from those applicable to the rest of China. Provisionally, if you see, China has a population of over 144 crores 70 lakh 24,052 people, and the majority of these are Han Chinese, who constitute just slightly over 90% of the population, while there are several other sizable minorities also, such as the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, and the Manchus also, the Manchurians, and there are Mongols as well in Inner Mongolia. So China has adopted 3 constitutions since its proclamation as the People's Republic of China in 1949. So the first constitution of China, in accordance with the Common Program, it was adopted in 1954, and in 1975 another constitution was adopted due to political upheaval in China. So in the post-Mao period, when Deng Xiaoping, when he came into power, when Deng Xiaoping came into power, a new constitution was adopted. And after the death of Mao Zedong, another constitution was adopted, which came to be known as the 1978 Constitution. And the present Constitution of China, it was promulgated on 4th December 1982, and this was prepared by the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party or Communist Party of China after prolonged nationwide discussions. So this constitution, the present constitution of China, it was officially recognized by the National People's Congress, which met in December 1982. And the draft of the constitution, it adheres to four cardinal principles. What are the four cardinal principles? The first is adherence to socialist road. The second is people's democratic dictatorship. The third is leadership by the Communist Party of China. And the fourth is Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong thought. Now let us discuss some of the basic features of the Constitution of China. So the Constitution of China is a written document, and the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, it is written in nature, and it is a brief document which consists of 138 articles, and there are only 4 chapters. So although the Constitution of China is brief, yet it lays down sufficient detail in it. So the Chinese Constitution, it not only deals with political, social, and economic objectives of the regime, but also with the structure of the state machinery as well, and its program for future as well. According to Article 1 of the Chinese Constitution, the People's Republic of China is a socialist state. And the socialist system is the basic system of the People's Republic of China, and no individual or organization is allowed to sabotage the socialist system. And the Constitution of China, it is a flexible constitution. So the Constitution of China is flexible, and Article 64 of the Constitution of China, it declares the statutes and resolutions that are adopted by the simple majority of the deputies of National People's Congress. And in comparison with the other rigid constitutions of the world, like the Japanese Constitution, the procedure for amendment in the Chinese Constitution is also comparatively easier. So the procedure for amendment in the Chinese Constitution is comparatively easier. Thus, the Constitution of China is considered to be flexible. So, another feature of the Chinese Constitution is that the unitary system. So, the Constitution of China, it provides for a unitary system. It provides for the centralization of powers at the center. And although there are provinces, autonomous regimes, and municipalities, but they are given powers by the central government, which can be taken back. These powers can be taken back also, whenever it is so desired. So China, it is the People's Republic. Article 2 of the Constitution of China, it states that all powers in the People's Republic of China, they belong to the people, the Chinese people. And these powers, they are exercised through the National People's Congress and the local People's Congress. So the people, they administered the state affairs and managed their economic, social, and other affairs through various channels in various ways in accordance with the law. So another feature of the Constitution of China is democratic centralism. So the Article 3 of the Chinese Constitution, it emphasizes that the state organs of the People's Republic of China, they apply the principle of democratic centralism. The people at different levels, they are instituted through democratic election and responsible to the people as well. So all the state organs, they are created by the people's congresses, and the division of powers and functions between the center and local state organs, that is guided by the principle of giving full play to initiative and enthusiasm of local authorities under the unified leadership of central authorities. So now let us discuss the role of the Communist Party of China. So, like the Soviet Union, the political system of China is also characterized by one-party system, which is the Communist Party of China. Under the leadership of Mao Zedong and Marxist and Leninist thought, it is the guiding and controlling force in China. And though the Constitution of China does not emphatically and clearly declares the supreme position of the Chinese Communist Party, Yet in practice, the Communist Party of China, it exercises complete control over the machinery of the government. So it's a one-party state. Unlike ours, we are a multi-party democratic state. China is a one-party authoritarian state. So unlike our legislature, which is a bicameral legislature having two houses, upper house, lower house, the Constitution of the People's Republic of China declares that there will be a unicameral legislature, which will be known as the National People's Congress. And this unicameral legislature is the highest organ of state power in China, and also the sole legislative assembly of China also. So this National People's Congress, which is the repository of all powers and authority in the country, and people, they exercise their powers through it. And the deputies of this National People's Congress, they are directly elected by the people. And there are fundamental rights and duties also mentioned in the Chinese constitution. So Article 33 to 56 of the second chapter of the constitution provide detailed description of the fundamental rights and duties of the citizens of China. So the individual's rights include right to vote, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, there is freedom of press as well, and freedom of assembly, freedom of association is also guaranteed, as well as freedom of procession and that of demonstration. And the Chinese state, it also protects the rights of citizens and their lawfully earned income and saving, also in their house, their property, and also and the Chinese citizens, they have the right to inherit property also. So the important duties, they include safeguarding the unity of of China, to abide by the laws of the Constitution of China, and to defend the motherland and resist aggression. Also, another feature is no discrimination and exploitation. So the Constitution of China, it declares that all nationalities, they are equal, and all types of discrimination or oppression with any nationality and acts which undermine the unity of the nationalities, they are prohibited. And it also disbands the exploitation of man by man or exploitation of men by the state. So now we have completed the discussion on the Constitution of China. So far we have discussed the constitution of four countries today. That is Brazil, Russia, India, and China, which form part of BRICS. Now let us discuss the constitutional framework of South Africa, which is the final country of BRICS. So located in the southern tip of the African continent, South Africa, it is bordered in the northwestern region by the Orange River, which separates South Africa from Namibia. And on the east, South Africa is bordered by the Limpopo River, which separates South Africa from Zimbabwe and southeastern Botswana. And also in the northeast, South Africa is bordered by Swaziland or Eswatini. And also there is an enclave inside South Africa, which is the country of Lesotho, which is surrounded on all sides by South Africa. So South Africa is Africa's most multiracial nation, which comprises of the people of African, Asian, and European descent. There are 11 official languages in South Africa. From that, one can gauge the extent of diversity in South Africa. Now let us discuss the political system of South Africa. So the territory of South Africa, which was formerly a British colony until its accession to independence. So as a self-governing dominion, it became independent in 1910. Formerly, it was a British colony. And this was done after the British Parliament passed the South Africa Act of 1909 by merging the four British dependencies of Cape Colony, Orange Free State, Natal, and Transvaal. So although the objectives of the British in merging these dependencies was to unite South Africa and consolidate its imperialist interests, but this resulted in dividing South Africa, with blacks excluded from political participation. So this development, which ultimately led to discontentment and racial conflict in the country, and the practice of exclusionary politics was also later institutionalized under the system of apartheid, which was an extreme form of legal segregation, based on race, and this was enforced by the Nationalist Party government between 1948 and 1994. So, in the year 1994, there was a sudden change that occurred, and that led to the end of white minority rule. And winds of democracy started blowing across Africa, and an increasingly unmanageable and violent revolutionary forces within South Africa, they forced the National Party government of President Frederick Wilhelm de Klerk to introduce reforms. And this ultimately resulted in the establishment of a constitutional democracy in South Africa, which was headed by the first non-white president of South Africa, who was Nelson Mandela, following his African National Congress's overwhelming win in the first multiracial elections in April 1994. Now let us discuss the constitutional history of South Africa. So South Africa's constitutional history and development can be divided into three key phases. The first is the period between 1909 and 1910. The second is the period 1910 and 1990, and finally the period 1990 to present times. So the South Africa Act of 1909, let us discuss that. The period 1909 to 1910, it covers the independence period of South Africa. And this period, it was essential for the genesis of the constitutional development of South Africa. So this period, it was characterized by the enactment of the South Africa Act by British Parliament, which established an independent union of South Africa, which comprised of the territories of Cape Colony, Orange Free State, Natal and Transvaal. So in reality, this was South Africa's independence constitution. Now let us discuss the constitution of 1961. So in 1960, following the drafting of a new constitution, South Africa's white voters, they voted in a constitutional referendum to abolish the Union of South Africa, which was created by the South Africa Act of 1909. And in the place of the Union of South Africa, the Republic of South Africa was established in 1960. However, in this referendum, only the white voters participated. The black voters, who were the overwhelming majority in the nation, they were not allowed to vote. So the Zulus, they were not able to vote because apartheid was enforced by the National Party government. And although premised on the South Africa Act, the 1961 Constitution of South Africa, it severed all ties with the British Empire, and the state president replaced the crown and the governor general, and all references to king, queen, and crown were removed. So now let us discuss the Constitution of 1983. So in 1983, a series of legislative reforms, they resulted in the enactment of a new constitution and also reconfiguration of state institutions and power. So these reforms, they were implemented through the Constitution of Republic of South Africa Act of 1983. And these reforms, they provided for an executive authority that was shared amongst an executive president elected for 5-year term. So now let us discuss the constitutional development in South Africa in the 1990s. In 1990, mounting international and domestic pressure and growing evidence and realization among the white political class that the apartheid system was unsustainable. So that forced the National Party towards dismantling the apartheid system. So the first step towards dismantling this system of apartheid was lifting of the ban on political organizations, in particular the African National Congress, and also the release of the veteran opposition leader Nelson Mandela after 27 years in Robben Island prison. And this was followed by repeal of the apartheid legislation. So between these developments and against the backdrop of intense political violence, the National Party, the African National Congress, and other political organizations, they engaged in a series of negotiations under the umbrella of the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, or CODESA. So these negotiations, they eventually led to the adoption of an interim constitution to govern the transition to a new South Africa. And this came after an all-white referendum in which over 60% of whites voted in favor of absolute reforms. So now let us discuss the Constitution of 1996. So a constitutional court, it passed the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa Act 108 of 1996. So it has been declared in this constitution that the Constitution of South Africa, it is the supreme law of land. It's the supreme law of the land, that is the supreme law of South Africa, and no other law can supersede this constitution. And this constitution, it also has provisions to protect the rights of the people of South Africa, and it is rated as one of the most progressive documents in the world. So human dignity, achievement of equality, and advocacy of human rights as well as freedom, these are the hallmarks of the Constitution of 1996. So this Constitution of 1996, it has been amended 17 times through various amendment acts. Now let us discuss some of the basic features of the South African Constitution. So let us discuss the features of the legislative branch. So there's a bicameral parliament of South Africa, which makes up the legislative branch of the national government. And this bicameral parliament, it consists of the National Assembly, which is the lower house, and the National Council of Provinces, the upper house. So the National Assembly consists of 400 members who are elected by popular vote using a system of party list proportional representation. So half of these members, half of these 400 members, they are elected from the party's provincial lists, and the other half are from the national lists. So the President of South Africa is elected by the members of the General Assembly, and upon election, the President of South Africa, who is Cyril Ramaphosa, he resigns as an MP, as a member of Parliament, and appoints a cabinet of ministers from amongst the members. So ministers, they retain their parliamentary seat, however. So President has to resign as MP. However, ministers, they retain their parliamentary seats, and the president and the ministers, they are responsible to the parliament, and they must be elected members to the parliament. And general elections, they are held at least once every 5 years. Now let us discuss the executive branch. So the president, the deputy president, and the ministers, they make up the executive branch of the national government. So the ministers, they are members of parliament who are appointed by the president to head the various departments of the national government. So the president is elected by the parliament from its members. So the ministers individually and the cabinet collectively, they are accountable to the parliament for their actions. So if we talk about the judicial branch, the third branch of South Africa government, it is an independent judiciary. So the judicial branch in South Africa, it interprets the laws using as a basis the laws that are enacted, and also explanatory statements are also made in the legislature during the enactment. So the legal system of South Africa, it's based on Roman Dutch law and also English common law, and it accepts compulsory International Court of Justice jurisdiction also with reservations. So these were the three branches that we discussed of South Africa, that is the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. So these are the three. And if you see in South Africa, unlike our country where we have first past the post system, in South Africa there is party list proportional representation system that is there. So and the Parliament of South Africa, it's a bicameral parliament, and the president, once he becomes the president, has to resign from the post of MP. And there is a deputy president as well. So the vice president is called the deputy president. So in today's class, we have discussed the constitutional framework of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. We have discussed their constitutions. We have discussed their parliamentary structure. We have discussed their executive structure, and also we have discussed the evolution of their constitution over the years. And also we have discussed the judicial system that is prevalent in all these BRICS nations. So thank you so much. Namaste.